Hey, smart authors, welcome back to another episode of the Smart Author Podcast. Today I am joined by Mohammed Ali, not the boxing man, but the framework guy. So Mohammed has a business called Framework Freedoms, and essentially what he does is he helps people build frameworks and then turn them into books so that they can build their business and truly stand out in a crowd, and also help with people reading the books and finishing the books and all of that kind of stuff. So today in our episode together, we did a deep dive on what frameworks are, how you can think and plan and build your own framework. And we also did a small snippet of how I can actually build a framework. So I got him to build me one on the call live, and it was completely on the spot. Didn't have any prep or anything like that, but he pretty quickly came up with one, and I was blown away. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you get a lot out of everything that he's spoken about and how you can actually utilize and leverage frameworks for yourself and for potentially your next book or first book that you might have written. So enjoy the episode, and I can't wait to hear what you think. Hey, Mohammed, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you are the guy that helps people with frameworks and then also helps them take those frameworks and turn them into books for their business. So I'd love if you could give everyone a bit of a background to yourself and how you came up with this idea specifically and how you kind of entered the space.
Of course. So I've always loved frameworks. Effectively speaking, frameworks are like mental jigsaw puzzles. When I was young, I used to love building jigsaw puzzles. And ultimately speaking, as I grew up into my career, that's effectively what I do. I help people who have got tons of experience, tons of knowledge, tons of solutions, and turn that all into something very easy to understand. Because we live in an age where people have got very short attention spans and they want very quick results. And one of the biggest problems that most of my clients face is the ability to really explain what they can do, all of those years and decades of experience in just a few seconds. So that's where a framework does really well. And what I've actually found is one of my biggest skills is helping people find that key idea, that key differentiator that basically separates them from everyone else, which it's effectively their framework. So that's why my business is called Framework Freedom, because that framework then allows you the freedom for them to ask more questions about you, to really consider working with you, and to look into depth of everything that you do. And then I started to realize that most of the most influential books that we've read, whether it's Think and Grow Rich, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, etc., all of them are based on frameworks. And I realized that a framework is the foundation of a key book, especially today, especially in the age that we live in right now, because the way that we read books is very different now. The way that we consume books, when we listen to books on Audible, for example, we always have that X button or that back button. So that's why it's so important now to have a have a book based around a framework, because then that framework is what keeps you engaged throughout the whole book. Because now you literally have to sell them not just on the front page or the cover, but every single sentence, because it's very easy for people to stop reading the book just as it is to start reading the book.
Yeah, love that. So would you say that frameworks are kind of like the big idea to a book, essentially?
Exactly. It's the big idea, but then it's also the body as well. Because the big idea needs to have a lot of support behind it. It needs to ensure that there's lots of content, lots of structure. The framework is, effectively speaking, not just a big idea, but then the big idea's big idea, and the big idea of the big idea of the big idea. Effectively speaking, what will happen with your book is it becomes like a Russian doll. And most people just start at the top layer. But what you need to have is you need to have multiple layers below that as well, because then they become your subsections, they become your chapters, your subchapters, your key points, etc. So what the framework does is effectively ensures that your book is as content rich as possible. And ultimately speaking, that's what your clients love.
Got it. Okay. So if we have someone listening here today, they're an author, a consultant, or an agency owner like myself, how do they go about starting the process to building their own framework?
The first thing to do with a framework is, effectively speaking, think about the type of framework that you want to use. There's three types of framework that you can have. The first is a horizontal framework, the second is a vertical framework, and the third is a cyclical framework. So horizontal framework is very simple. It takes you from point A to point B, where there's a fixed point A and a fixed point B. So, for example, having no job to having a job, having no Facebook ads to having Facebook ads. So if you're an agency owner, then your framework could basically be how to set up Facebook ads in an hour. Because basically what happens here is, here they have no framework, they have no Facebook ads, and here an hour later they have Facebook ads. Now, that then leads us to the second type of framework, which is a vertical framework. Now, for example, in a vertical framework, it's all about levels. It's like a ladder. So, for example, as an agency owner, it could be here spending $0 per month. Here, okay, now we'll get to you spending $100 per day profitably. Now $1,000 per day profitably. Now $10,000 a day profitably. So this is all about the ladder. And the cyclical framework is all about the habits and the routines. So, for example, as an agency owner, 7 things you should check about your Facebook campaign every single day to ensure that it's healthy. And what they can do is they can have a checklist that they complete every single day. And every single day they're completing this checklist, and it ensures that their Facebook ads is working well according to your framework. So the first basic step is to decide what framework you're going to use. Because as you can see here, that then determines and directs the attention and the direction you're going to be going in terms of your book, in terms of your framework.
Gotcha. Okay. So I can already see how one framework could involve multiple other frameworks inside them to kind of get to the end idea. So do you find that that's something that comes up quite often for some of your clients?
Exactly. So what I always suggest is have multiple frameworks. You can always have a top level framework, then they can have sub level frameworks below that, sub levels, etc. like that. One of the key things that you've got to do as an educator, effectively speaking, in the help industry, is ensure that your framework is easy to understand. You don't want it to be too overwhelming or too complicated. So always break it up. In the same way that a pizza is sliced, you can always slice your framework into multiple sections. You can always layer it. So I always suggest to have a very simple basic framework for your book. And then as you go into each chapter, that's when you can start introducing your sub frameworks.
Okay, that makes sense. Cool. And all right, so if someone has gone through the process, they've thought about like, hey, what do I do, and how do I break it down into a major framework and then the sub frameworks in each kind of area. Is it very difficult for me now to go and turn that into a book, or is it a pretty straightforward process?
Well, effectively speaking, you've done the biggest part of your book, which is the planning stage. One of the key things that you've got to have with your book is a map. It's like going from a destination. If you've got a map to go from point A to point B, it's much more easier if you don't have a map. So your framework effectively becomes your plan. It becomes your map for your book. And then effectively speaking, it's just about fleshing it out, finding stories, finding case studies, finding examples, etc. So your framework is, effectively speaking, the biggest chunk of your book done. It's the thinking stage. And then after that, it just comes to the, effectively speaking, the reconfirming phase.
Mm. Mm. So it's the plan, and then we fill it in essentially with the content, the context, and the stories to kind of make the framework and the ideologies around them stick to the reader.
Exactly. The framework is, effectively speaking, the body, and then the book and the ideas and the content is what gives life to the framework.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So from your perspective, what specifically makes these framework books that you build more sticky than other books on the marketplace? Like, obviously, the first step I think is having a book, and that is already helping you stand out as an authority in the marketplace. But then you've also got to compete with competitors who have their books as well, and some of them were not written by Mohammed, so they're not awesome. And so, how does someone ensure that their book stands out and is actually consumable using these frameworks?
The key points about frameworks is finding a framework is a thinking exercise. And as you think, you're getting to know yourself, getting to know your identity. So one of the key points is to have something that is very personal to you. So, for example, I'm a big Bob Dylan fan, and I love the line from My Back Pages, using ideas as my maps. And effectively speaking, that is what a framework is. It's using an idea as your map. So the first thing to do is when you're using a map is you've got to choose your destination. Now, if my destination is Copenhagen, or if it's New York, or if it's Sydney, or if it's Scandinavia, it's going to be very, very different. So the first thing to do is to actually think about your destination. And your destination is effectively your identity. It's what your clients want, it's what you want your clients to think about you as. So for example, I'm a business philosopher. So my book is very philosophical, it's very structured. If you're more of a creative person, you want to have more images in there. You want to have more doodles in there, for example. So what happens with your framework and turning your framework into a book is that what happens is what we see today is we see a lot of mass-produced books. We see books that are very much of the same mold. What your framework will effectively will do is it will help you to create your book in a way that is very personal to you. And that's what is a key differential, because what your book will, what that will then allow to happen is now people will get to know you, like you, and trust you. So what happens with most books is people just get to know about what you can do. But your framework effectively is an opening into your soul. It's an opening into your identity. And through that, they can start to get to know you more, like you more, trust you more. It builds credibility at a much more deeper level because they're getting to know you and not just what you can do as well.
Mm. Yeah. And does that help them come to the conclusion that you're going to be a good fit to help them further if they need that help?
Of course, one of the key things that I've done is I've done probably thousands of frameworks in my career. So I've become very good, very astute at basically helping people to pick out that framework within just a few minutes of them, getting to know their identity. It's a second skill that I've developed, a second sense. And so one of the key things that we basically begin with is helping you find that identity. Because once you've got that identity, then that's what we build everything on. So in the same way that we build everything on on a horizontal, vertical, or cyclical framework, your identity, there's a lot of frameworks that I use to help you actually find that identity and ensure that you're presenting your best identity to your audience that they can then buy into. And obviously, once they buy into you, they'll buy into your business and your products and your services as well.
Mm. Okay, cool. Well, I would love to do something a little bit cheeky right now. Let's work on a
Of
framework
course.
for me on this podcast so that people can kind of see you in action. Because I think once they
Perfect.
see, what you do, they're going to be like lining up to work with you and get your help with framework. So, you know a little bit about my business already. We had a call last week. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, what's the process look like? How do we start to find frameworks?
The first thing we do is we start to look at your target audience and look at the references they already have. Now, one of the key things that we have is we have, for example, a lot of the authors that you're going to be working with are business owners. They're probably into personal development and they're into goal setting. And most importantly, they're probably into smart goal setting, which is probably one of the most common ways of setting goals. And the whole purpose of a smart goal is that it's very measurable. It's very easy to understand. It's got a clear output. And one of the key things as an ad agency is that you also want to provide the same thing. You want to make sure that they have smart goals. So effectively speaking, being a smart author with smart ads helps you reach your smart goals.
Mm,
So what we're doing here is we're already starting to take what people already know and we're using that in our advantage. Because if you're re-educating someone on something, it takes a lot more time and effort. Whereas if you're just basically taking something that's already in their subconscious mind and bringing it into alignment into what you're doing, it becomes much more easier. So one of the key things that we'd look at is we'd look at your framework and see, we'd look at your service, look at your podcast, look at your business, etc., and see how is it smart. And more
mm,
importantly, so basically, one of the key lines we can use is we could use, for example, smart ads make your ads smarter. So, for example, let's just have a look here at what the SMART acronym is, because we can start to use that as it is. So, the SMART chart is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time based. So, this is actually what you can use in your business. You can say that You've already got SMART goals, but guess what? We as an agency can now have smart ads around your
Mm,
goals to ensure that they happen. So, for example, our campaigns will help you become specific to your market. Will help you to stand out so that they're the only one that they feel is specific. We'll make sure it's measurable so that you're getting the right ROI that you want. Every day, every week, you'll get a report of of the ads, of the ROI you're getting. Third thing is we'll make sure it's achievable. We'll make sure that what we're doing is not too aggressive, it's not too passive, but it's achievable. We'll make sure we're
mm,
choosing the right road. Then we'll make sure they're relevant. We'll make sure you're using the right medium, the right channel for your ads. One of the
mm,
things that we have as an agency is we're in the battlefield. We know everything that's going on every single day, so we know what's going to be relevant to you today because all of these algorithms are changing so often, sometimes 400 times a year, once a day. But we know that because we're relevant, we know what's going on a day-to-day basis.
mm,
And finally, we'll make sure that our projects are time-based. One of the key things as an agency is that we treat your business as our business. In the same way
mm,
that you've got goals for your business, we make sure that we hit your goals so that they can then have a positive effect on your goals. We work with you in your business as opposed to someone external so that everything that we do is time based so that you achieve that. So this is one of the things that you can use as an agency. Now, let's look at the podcast. Well, obviously, it's specific. It's not going to be about health. It's not going to be about losing weight. It's not going to be about buying a home. It's about being an author and having smart ads. Being an author the smart way. Being an author in a way that works in today's world. Then, obviously, your podcast is measurable. You're talking to high quality guests who know what they're doing. You can make sure that you're going to get at least one or two key takeaways. Third thing is achievable. It's something that's short, easy to understand in many mediums. And so because of that, it's going to be achievable to get something at least from this podcast. Obviously, then it's relevant because you're talking to a very specific audience about a very specific topic. So it's really relevant on base. And obviously, because it's a podcast, because it's live, because it's frequent data, it's all time based. It's relevant to what's happening in the world today. It's literally speaking, got the finger on its pulse. So this is one of the frameworks that we can use for smart ads and for the smart ads profile ad podcast. How it's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time based. Because what we're doing with that is we're already working with what people know and think about and just putting it into a new medium that they haven't thought about before.
mm. As you're like going through the SMART acronym, I was just like, oh man, how good is that? Like that is right up our alley as well, and how we operate as an agency. So I
There we
didn't even
go.
pick it, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, one of the great things about frameworks is, like I said, a lot of times everything is done subconsciously. And most of the times, there's actually a framework that's already there because you've picked it up subconsciously. It may be
Mm,
because of a book that you read a few years ago that influenced you, or an
mm,
idea that you had that influenced you. So a lot of times, the framework is already there, but it's just not in your conscious awareness. And because I've worked with so many frameworks and done this so many times, I can instantly see where that influence must have come from. So, so for you, you must have probably read about the smart goal system a few years ago, and that had a direct influence on what you're doing today. But you just haven't drawn the dots yet. So one of the things that I do as a business philosopher, using ideas as your maps. You had that idea a few years ago. Now that idea has come to fruition, but now you've got the
mm,
map of why that's happened like that.
mm. Well, funnily enough, um, I had a lot of tactical names picked before Smart Author, and ultimately the conclusion was when I did have Smart Author as an option that no one wants to be a dumb author. And that's kind of how I came to the conclusion that
Well,
it was a good name.
it's actually quite funny because I made a little joke the other day. There was basically a sale on for the book Writing Fiction for Dummies. And I actually said I prefer writing fiction for smart people.
Yeah.
So it's the same kind of context here.
Oh, man. Well, okay, cool. Well, I'm absolutely going to use that framework. I hope you know that now. It's
Of
live and
course,
it's
I'm
public.
glad. Excellent. I love that. That's brilliant.
Thank you. Cool. So if someone is looking to get support on even just getting frameworks out of their head based on what they do as a service provider or a coach or a consultant, um, what's the best way for them to, if they want to DIY it for themselves? Do you have any content based around this first and foremost? And then second, if they want your help with building frameworks and actually writing a book based on those frameworks, what's the best way?
Of course, the best thing to do is to read my book, Framework Freedom. So you can get that from frameworkfreedom.com. In that whole book, I basically base it around two frameworks. So you can see me use two frameworks, how I create it, how I set it up, how I develop it. And then once that's done, then if you really want my help on that, then just drop me an email, mo@frameworkfreedom.com, and then we can have a chat about that. And within just a few minutes, just like we just saw earlier, I can literally get your framework out from you.
Awesome. And I highly recommend that you at least speak to Mo and see if there's any value that he can offer or any advice that he can offer. But certainly he would be someone who would be fantastic to help you build your framework and start working on your book today if you don't already have one. And maybe it's even, your next book as well. So thank you for coming on the show, Mo, and I'll make sure that all the links are in the description below.
My pleasure. Thank you, Chris. It's been a pleasure here, and good luck with your new smart framework.
Thank you. Damn, what an awesome episode. If you've got a book that you're advertising or not yet advertising, and you want some book marketing advice directly from me, I'd love to set up a book marketing review with you. It's basically a 30-minute consulting session that you can get for free, worth $1,000, where we can basically dive right into everything that you're currently doing or not doing, and everything that you could do to sell as many books as possible according to your goals. So if you want to sell 100 books a month, 1,000 books a month, or anything in between, we can really help you outline a strategy to help you get there. To book your session with me, just click the link in the description below, smartauthormedia.com/chat, and you'll be able to book a time that suits you to go through everything with me so that we can help you sell some more books starting today. Look forward to speaking to you on the call.